About halfway through my time in seminary, I was doing dishes. I was a refectorian in seminary, which is a really fancy word for the guy that washes the dishes. But after lunch one day, I was back at the dishwasher and scrubbing gunk off of plates. And one of the guys that was on the rota with me, he was a year behind me in seminary. He asked me. He said, TJ, when you get to the end of seminary, you get to the end of all of this whole ordination to the priesthood process. What would you do if the bishop said no? What would you do if this doesn't work out? You've spent 3 years of your life, in grad school, going through all of these different hoops for the diocese in order to become an ordained priest. What would happen if you got to the end of the process and the answer was no? Right? And it was an interesting question. It's not as though I hadn't thought about it before. I just never had anybody ask me it directly before. And this particular individual, he's a really nice guy, but he's bounced around several dioceses. He started the process and then he's had a no come his way more than once, actually more than twice in his lifetime. Yeah, and so as I'm processing the question, I'm thinking about the fact that my family and I, we uprooted and left everything, sold a house even when in St. Louis, and moved to Wisconsin, moved to a place where we didn't know anybody, moved 6 hours away from our family members, our closest family members, and kind of into the great unknown. So yeah, a no at the end of the process would have seemed like a really huge deal. It really would have sucked, right? But I remember in the moment, as all the gears are spinning and I'm thinking through all the nuances of his question, that a no would have been fine. And it's not as though I didn't want to become a priest or I lost faith in this kind of sense of call that I've felt on my life. I knew it was all going to work out the way that I had planned for it to work out. But I also knew if it didn't work out the way that I planned for it to work out, it would all still work out. It would all still be okay at the end of the day. Yeah. I can't tell you how freeing that moment was and how thankful I am for that friend's question. I can't tell you how it was like a huge revelation, because all of life for most of us is about jumping from one set of plans to the next and fulfilling all of our dreams and kicking off items off the bucket list, right? Striking them off the list. And that day was incredibly freeing. It's incredibly freeing whenever you set out on a path and you pursue. There's nothing wrong with having dreams and pursuing them, this sense of purpose. But there's something really freeing to the thought, to the feeling of, if it doesn't work out the way that I want it to, it's all going to be okay. There's a quote from the ancient philosopher Epictetus. He said that we shouldn't hope for events or things to happen the way that we want them to. Rather, we should just be happy with them happening the way that they work out, for this is the path to peace. And there's a lot of truth to that. It's not as though you don't have dreams of your own or aspirations or what have you, or a plan for your life. But as we all know, sometimes things don't go according to the plan. And as the great Kenny Rogers once sang, sometimes you got to know when to hold them, and sometimes you got to know when to fold them. Knowing when to hold them, that's the easy part. Knowing when to fold them, when to say this isn't going to work out, whenever we can accept the fact that I know it's going to be okay, that our plans can unravel and we will still be just fine, right? Everything will continue to be just fine. Life will go on. That's the harder thing to accept. And I think that in and of itself, as I get older, I feel like that in and of itself is the beginning of wisdom. Learning when to fold them. Learning how to plan well, to choose well for your life, but learning how to choose well when life doesn't work out the way that you want it to. That's wisdom. there's a lot to that. I think that for me is the beginning place of wisdom. Other people would jump off on different things, but I think for me, the person who knows how to handle life well when life isn't going well, that is a wise person. That's somebody to pay attention to. That's somebody to listen to. Yeah. For that person has understood something that was a central tenet of ancient Stoic philosophy, which went on to influence early Christianity in many big ways. But the central tenet of ancient Stoic philosophy in Greece and at Rome, and in the Roman culture and Greek culture, was that there's these things in life that you can control. So make the best of it. Control it well. Those things that you really can control them wisely and well, with lots of purpose and intentionality. But also the other side of it, the flip side to that, is there's lots of things that are well beyond your control. And learning how to make peace with that is true wisdom. That might even be the epitome of wisdom if you ask some people. If you ask the Stoic philosophers, that would be the epitome of wisdom. The wise person, the sage, is somebody who knows how to discern those things that are within their control and those things that are not within their control, right? The day you die, it's not going to be within your control. So you can sit and fret about it and just waste all this time and energy worrying about something that's beyond your control. Or you can spend all your time, effort, and energy channeling all of that energy into something you can manage and you can control, which is the inner disposition, your inner being, right? Yeah. Wisdom is learning the difference between those things in life you can control and those things that you can't, and refusing to waste any more effort or energy and anxiety on those things that are beyond one's control. I think it's interesting to think about this. This is kind of like a very kind of secular-ish, right, reflection. And I want this series to be a little bit more just open beyond the barriers and walls of Christianity. But it's interesting to think about this in light of, we're getting close to Holy Week. Next Sunday for us is Palm Sunday. Then we go into Holy Week, Good Friday, and all of that good stuff, where a lot of the focus is on Christ going to his cross. And when you study the life of Christ in the Gospels and all the stuff that we reflect on in liturgy, there's very much a large part of Holy Week and Christ's narrative where he understands those things that are within his control and those things that aren't. He can preach the gospel. He can embody the presence of love, the presence of truth, the presence of genuineness, right? But he cannot control how warped religious leaders are going to react to any of that, how the crowds are going to react to that, how the institution is going to react to that, how the Roman government is going to react to that. He can just do those things that are within his control and trust that even if he does go to the cross, God still has him. Life will continue to go on in its own weird way, right? And things will continue to work out. Maybe not the way that he planned, and others planned especially. It's a huge part of the story from today's reading, is everybody had this plan about how this Jesus movement was meant to work out. They wanted to control it, and they wanted to control Christ and not let him die. But at the end of the day, they learned that none of that was within their control. We would be wise, again, to discern what's within our control and what's not. For if that is not the beginning of wisdom, that's pretty damn close to it. See you next week.